Anyone have any ideas what sockets are? What are we talking about here? Has anyone seen WebSockets in one of the other stacks so far? I knew there was one person who did.
Yeah, I think Tanner used it for Python.
Right, right. So the concept of WebSockets is basically something that's a little bit different than what we've been used to. What we've been doing thus far is just having a single request and response cycle. And the difference with WebSockets is that instead of having just one cycle, we're going to essentially open up a two-way means of communication between the client and the server, so that if some event happens on either side, we can emit that event, and then the other side will be aware of it and can respond to it. So the concept of WebSockets is something that goes across languages and across platforms. So we can have, I know Tanner was doing his project, he was using Django channels for doing his chat implementation. And that's essentially the whole, how WebSockets work, is we have this open connection, either side can emit an event, and then the other side can do something about that event if they want to. So let's just look at real quick. There's some. If you do a search for WebSockets, you'll come up with this. I'll try to make this a little bigger for you. So the WebSocket specification defines an API establishing socket connections between a web browser and a server. So there is this persistent connection between the client and the server, and both parties can start sending data at any time. And then over here, again, it's just a communication protocol. Some of that stuff probably wouldn't mean anything to you. RFC 6455 in 2011. Pretty exciting stuff. So I think what we'll do is we're just going to kind of explore a really basic implementation of this, and we're not going to get heavily into chat or anything like that, but we're just going to kind of look at the basics of how each side can fire off an event, and then we're going to listen for those events on the other side and respond to that. So the first thing that we'll do, since I've got this folder here with a new project, and I'll just open up a terminal for that, and we're going to initialize our npm project. How do we do that again? Init. Okay. And what I'm going to do, since I don't want to go through all those prompts asking a number of different questions, I just want to accept the defaults. So I'm just going to add this flag here, y. So there we go. It tells you what it generated here from my package.json. And then here I can open that up. So I don't have any dependencies yet because I haven't yet installed anything. The two things that we're going to want to install here are going to be Express, just for our basic web server needs, like how we've been doing. And then the other thing that I want to install is socket.io. Question back there?
Real quick,
Yeah.
when you init, when you go install it, does it do anything else other than creating the package.json?
That's basically it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just don't know if it's-
Yeah, you could literally, that's a good question. You could create this package.json yourself with a very minor, like for instance, I could create just a package.json file and put a name in there. There are some basic things I believe that are required. I think version might be required, and I think license may be required as well. So that's one way that you can do it. If you don't even want to go through that whole process, you can just set up your package.json file yourself. But we've got ours now, and so I'm going to install Express. And I had a question about doing multiple installations at one time. And yes, you can do it. So if I'm going to install two packages like we are here, I can just do that in one command. I don't have to do everything separate. So we'll just go npm install express, and then we're going to do socket.io. There we go. So we've got our two dependencies here, our package.json. There's some other dependencies that we've been kind of talking about and using a little bit here and there, one of which was body parser, you guys may remember. There was also EJS too that we were using for templating. But in this assignment, we're actually not gonna need either one of those. So the general rule of thumb is that if you don't need a dependency, don't install it, because there's no reason to bloat up your node modules folder. In fact, if we want to just take a look at how big that folder already is, why do you think it's so big like that? Anyone? Exactly. There are sub-dependencies that have to be added as well. So just because I only installed Express and Socket.io, they also brought along a lot of their friends with them. So that's just for two dependencies. Our node modules folder has already gotten rather large. You can imagine if we had, say, 10 or 20 dependencies, that folder would really start to balloon. So that's one of the reasons why we always want to, when we're creating a project, something that, say, you're going to use with version control, you can set up a .gitignore file and then just drop your node modules in there. So meaning that when Git does its thing and it checks over to see do we have any changes in this particular project, it's going to skip over any changes, or all the content in the node modules folder it will completely ignore. And that's what we want, because we don't want to bundle up our node modules. We want a person who's installing our project to just run npm install, and then all those dependencies will be installed on their machine in that directory. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create a server file, and we'll just call this server.js. Oops. You guys remember how we bring in Express? Yes, we're going to require it. So we'll just set it to this const variable, require Express. And then the other thing that we want to do is we want to, of course, create an app by invoking Express itself. So we could say const, and you can call this whatever you want, but I'll just call it server in this case, and we're going to invoke that. So let's just say bare minimum here. We're gonna do server.listen. We'll just listen on port 3000, or it could be a port of your choice. And then of course listen takes this callback where we can. I'm just going to do an anonymous function here. Hopefully this syntax doesn't really. You guys okay with this syntax here? My callback function is not taking in any arguments at all, so I'm just leaving an empty parens there. And inside here, I'm just going to console log that I'm listening on that port. So, oops, listening on port 3000. And that's equivalent to me just doing this. I could say function, an anonymous function that takes in nothing is just going to console log that. All right. So we've got this. The other thing that we're gonna want to have is just a directory for some static files, because we are going to need to render just a basic HTML page within which we're going to do some things. So let's say server.use, and we're going to use the express static method. And we need to pass it in what is the what is the actual directory that we're gonna have static files in. So we'll just say it's this dir name, and then we want to tack on, we'll just say it's the static folder. So that's that. And then over here, let's actually create that folder. And then inside our static folder, let's just create a basic HTML page. Index.html. I'll get some boilerplate in there. Okay, and then let's just put something on there. Welcome to Sockets. Like that. And then I'm going to run, let's run nodemon with some arguments here. So JS, and then we'll also check for changes in HTML files. And then we're going to run that against our server.js. And we are listening on port 3000, so let's open it up and make sure that's working. 3000, welcome to Sockets. Open up the console here. So inside of our Sockets assignment here, this is kind of showing us what do we need to do to turn this basic. We have a basic Express server. What do we need to do to convert it into a Sockets type of backend for us? And what we need to do is actually require socket.io. And what that's going to give us is a function that we can invoke against our server that we've created. So let's come back into our server file here. And underneath here we'll say, oops, const io equals what this is going to equal what this is going to give us back. So we're going to require socket.io, and we're going to invoke that against the server that we've already created. Okay, and then we crash. You're trying to attach socket.io to an Express request handler function. Please pass a. Oh. Okay. Has anyone done this assignment yet? That could be, yeah. Let's try to move that listener up. So let me just bring this down here.
So are you creating a separate server, or is it running both HTTP and WebSockets?
Yeah, it's not really a separate server. They're just both. They would both be running. So here we seem to have an issue. You're trying to attach socket.io to an Express request handler function. Please pass a server instance. All right, so let's look up real quick using socket.io with Express, because I think there's maybe a slightly different syntax there. Okay, so Express. So the way that they're doing it here is they're actually creating a server using the HTTP module here like we were doing before. And then invoking the .server method against the app that we've already created for Express. So let's try that. So we'll just take this guy here, come back here, instead of server, we'll just call this app, and then app, oops, okay. So let's say the server is going to require the HTTP module, and then we're going to run the .server method against the app that we created. And then this should still be app.listen. Let's see if this... Okay, so that seemed to fix the crashing. So that's good. So the other thing that we're going to do, back to this assignment here, is that we're going to set up a listener. So io.on, this is essentially a listener. We're listening to a connection event. So every time a person connects to our server, that's going to emit this event, and we'll be able to do something when that happens. So here they've got a little counter, and we can set that up in ours. We could just say let counter equals 0, and that's essentially just saying we don't have any connections yet. We're just starting up the server, so nobody has yet connected to us. And then I can move this up. Oops. So let's listen to that. So io.on, and then we'll say connection. And then that's going to take in a callback, which is a function that takes in some individual socket. So the particular socket that just connected to us is going to be represented by this argument here, the socket argument. So let's do something in here, and we'll say console.log new connection, and then we'll actually log the socket itself as well. All right. Then if we come back here to our page and I refresh this, notice that nothing has happened yet. Why is that? Any ideas? Why we're not getting any? We're not getting inside the connection event on the server side, right? Why might we not be getting inside there?
Neither side of the connection is sent any information.
Close. Here, what the issue is, the server is completely set up for these connections. Have we done anything with the client side, though? No. So we haven't done anything on the client side to actually connect to the server. Now, we are loading the page, so in that sense, we've just made a GET request. That's all we did. We just made a GET request to the index route, and we got our index.html. That's it. So the client side is going to require some changes as well. And here in the assignment here, you'll see they're pulling in jQuery, which you guys have been using a bit. And then we're also pulling in socket.io itself. It looks like if we load this up here, let me ask you guys this. Will this work, this source right here? As is, though. Like, we've made no changes right now. Would that work?
No,
No, why not?
because it's not a full URL to it.
So yeah, it's a path, but the thing is, our static path currently only routes to the static folder. And do we have a socket.io in our static folder? Not right now, right? So if I save this and I refresh it, oops, that's the wrong thing. We should get an error in our console. So it's trying to find this file that we haven't directed it to the correct place to get it. So instead of just going to the static folder, we can also use express static to route to other places too. So if I wanted, for instance, if I wanted to also look for static files in the node modules directory, I could do that as well. So if I go express.static, and then I say the current dir that we're in plus node modules, it should also look inside node modules. And inside node modules, we've got socket.io, and then the subpath here that we're looking for is what? Socket.io.js. And I think that would be, we would probably want the client-side version. So let's look inside the client-side version. So inside the lib, socket.io. Where were they pulling that here? All right, so let's just try to bring in one of these socket.io libraries. So we've got the client library here, and I'm just going to say, so we already set that up as a static path. We're going to look inside the node modules. So instead of the path that they gave us, let's try to do it here real quick. So say socket.io, and then we're going to go inside the lib, and then we'll go inside client.js. Right. But let's go inside client. Like that. So inside client, we've got the dist here, which gives us socket.io.js. And let's just path it like, we'll path it like that. So dist socket.io.js.
Are you going in socket.io/client or socket/client?
Good point. So it should be socket.io-client, like that. And then this, let's see if we're at least getting a working file. Okay, so our file seems to be loaded, and if we check the network tab here, we'll see that there was nothing loaded. All right. Probably nothing. Because again, we haven't done anything yet. All we did was we just loaded this file. So we still need to establish some kind of a connection on the front end with the back end. So the code here that they're showing us is that on the document ready, we're going to create a socket by invoking the IO method. And the IO method becomes available because we're loading up this script up here. And then on the we're saying on this specific event, we want to do this thing. So let's just see if we can get a socket going on this. So down inside here, let's just set up a script element, and then we'll use our $sign because we've brought in jQuery. Oops. And then our ready function is just going to set up our IO. So we'll say const IO equals, oops, I'm sorry, const socket equals IO. And then we'll just console log the socket. Back here. All right, so we were able to get some kind of action here, but we're getting some errors from our socket.io, right? Yeah, so every time it's making those GET requests, we're having some kind of an issue. Sure. Right. So we haven't yet done anything with our socket, so yeah, I haven't actually connected, right? So socket.onGreeting function, what that would mean is that if we got a greeting, actually let's go back to our terminal on the server side real quick, because we should at least be connecting, right? Are we connecting? So if we were connecting, we would have logged new connection and then the actual socket itself. So, because this could just be any event, we could just say greeting, and then we'll have a function against whatever came back. So we'll say that's the data, and then we'll just console log data.
I love it matters, but I think this is semicolon
On the client side,
right
in here.
log
Oh
socket.
yeah, nice.
References
Yeah, it doesn't seem to. So let's see. Let's go back into socket.io. Let me try to bring in a different element here, because that doesn't seem to be doing exactly what we want. So let's go socket.io lib client.js, and then refresh that. Yeah, that did not work. Not defined. One second here.
Something's making it keep going.
Yeah, so the reason why this error keeps happening though is because it's constantly polling for data. So when we have this connection going on, it's constantly trying to hit the server side. But why this socket does not want to behave is a little bit in the platform here. Yeah, it was, because they were going socket.io, socket.io.js. So if we're inside here,
Yeah, because you doing some different
socket.js.
You might be able to get like red alert
Yeah, that's actually true. Let's see if we can just do it through a CDN. Good call on that. Socket.io, CDN. Okay, so let's just take this one here, copy this, and then we'll drop that into the source.
higher, right? Instead of 3.3.
Say that again.
You're pulling in 2.2, right?
3.3?
You're pulling in 2.2, but the first script you wrote in your text editor is 3.3.
This is jQuery though.
Oh, that's jQuery.
Yeah, yeah. So different script. Same thing. Well, this is troubling. Why is it having an issue connecting to the server?
It's saying your error is IO isn't defined.
No, IO is defined because we were able to invoke it, and we actually logged the socket itself here.
What exactly is the error?
So, well, the error is that it's not connecting to the back end here. So here we'll just create a socket using the IO method by invoking that, and then So this stuff we could easily comment out because we're just simply trying to establish the connection.
Is it because you're not admitting something? You have to. There's nothing on the front end.
We shouldn't have to admit anything. Let's check. So if we're on the socket.io, here we go. So here, so on the client side, their syntax is a little bit different. So they're saying io.connect, and then, all right, well, let's just try it that way real quick. So we'll just say socket is going to be io.connect, and then we'll just connect to localhost 3000. Oops. And then let's just see if that still is complaining. Hang on one second, guys. Sorry about this. Let me just check some other.
Try to give it something on the front end.
Well, I just wanted to glance at some, because there should be some socket assignments in here that I was playing around with, but it should connect, yeah. I don't know which one of these was. Oh, maybe it was this epic button. Try this real quick. So our index.html brings in socket.io.js. Oh, I had a static script there. Okay. So yeah, socket is just IO. Don't know that that was. Yeah, no specific version. No, because you're just npm installing it. So it is what it is. Yeah, so they were mapping it like that. Let me see how I was mapping it. I remember this presented some issues, and I just want to double check how I mapped it. So here, so if socket.io.js comes in, I was mapping it to socket.io-client dist socket. That's what we were mapping to, no? Yeah. Yeah, something is off. It's very hard to say what it is, though. Because we shouldn't have those 404s like this. Them. No, and our server. Let's see, in our server, we're just doing this. I don't know. You guys want to break? I'll debug this and then I'll call you back in. Because I don't want you to be sitting here like.
Wait, on your previous assignment,
Huh.
how did you set that up at the top? The exact same way?
Yeah, hold on. Let me just stop this.